Welcome. If you are new here, which you kind of have to be because I just started this probably like 3 days ago, my name is Tara, and I am here today to show you what books made me who I am today. And there's a lot of them because I read quite a bit. If you're unfamiliar with me, or like if you don't know me in real life, I do have a bookstagram, which I will put right here. I've been reading since I was a little girl. I didn't really have any friends in elementary school, so I would just go to the library and pick up whatever. I think because I've been reading basically my whole life, I think we should start this from chronological order. I like seeing my development as I go through, and I have quite a big stack. I was staring at my bookshelf for the longest time and being like, what books did make me who I am? And then I just kept pulling them out because it was like, yeah, this one did this and this one did this. And I think that's a good testament to show that if you read, if you're a reader, so many books impact you in so many little ways, and everything that you read, that you experience, that you live through, not just through books or reading, but through life, it will always stick with you. Some part of the experience will always stick with you. Even if it's like a really, really bad book, it will stay in my head and I will never forget it. This is the stack that I came up with. So, okay, I think I know where to start. I feel like if you were a reader as a kid and you started reading in elementary school or middle school, it was one of 3 series that got you into reading again. It was either The Hunger Games, Harry Potter, or The Lightning Thief, Percy Jackson and the Olympians. I loved this series so much. When I was in elementary school, I would not stop thinking about it. I think we all, those of us who have read this series, we all went through our little Greek mythology phase because of it. I would literally go through and write down every single Greek goddess, what they were the gods or goddess of, and like it was such a good phase. It was such like a really strong hyperfixation. It brings out the inner child in me whenever I think of how this series made me feel, and I've been meaning to do a reread for the longest time because I just know that I'm gonna love it the same way that I did. How old was I in elementary school? What, 12, 14 years ago? I'm 22. I don't know how old I was. You get the point. I'm gonna feel the same way that I did in elementary school when I read this again. So in elementary school, then we went to middle school, and I've always been like reading here and there as I went through like elementary into middle school into high school, but there were always these distinct points where I picked up reading again, and I would find a book, I would love it, and then I would start reading once more, because there'd always be like the brief periods of like life. I'm going through like middle school and high school, I'm hanging out with friends, I'm like learning how to be a human. There were always little points where I just wasn't reading as much. In middle school, there were 2 books that I read that really like spun me on my head all over again, and I was like, I love reading, I love reading, I love what it can do, I love how it can transport me. And the first one is 1Q84 by Haruki Murakami. I really had no business reading this in the 6th grade. Was it 6th grade? It was 7th and 8th grade. But this book, I think this was really what opened me up to how large the field of reading is, what like the books that I can read, how many different things there are that I could read about, what they can do to me as the reader, and how it can make me feel, how it can transport me to other worlds. And this was my first book that wasn't just like pure fantasy. It was like surrealism, you know Haruki Murakami's books are kind of just like magical surrealism in an actual reality where the characters are still feeling the same emotions that we feel, and like it's so real and so raw, but there's so many little elements of just surrealism. And this book really did it for me. I was on a trip to Peru with my parents, and we were on a train for like a day maybe, and I remember reading this in 2 days. This 1,000+ page book, I read it in 2 days just because I couldn't stop reading it. Like, I was obsessed with this book for the longest time. Throughout all of middle and high school, I would be like, you need to read this, you need to read this, please read this. And ever since then, I have just been a fan of Haruki Murakami. I know he has like little weird quirks about his writing, especially with the way that he writes as women. I know that's a big controversy thing, but just the way that his the worlds that he builds, it's just so special to me, and I just can't stop reading it. And I know he has like addressed a few of the issues in his recent releases, so hopefully I can read his latest release. I think it's the city and its uncertain walls. I have it on my shelf already, and I actually pre-ordered that book from a UK bookstore just because I like the cover so much. Let me show you. Look how beautiful this is. It's so beautiful compared to the US version. Oh my god, the US version, dog crap. I don't know if I can curse on YouTube. Yeah. Second book, Life of Pi. And I don't even know what prompted me to pick up this book. I think this was around when the movie came out, when I read this, but I'm pretty sure I read it before the movie. I think I was always just one of those people who refused to watch something if like the premise interests me and I want to read the book first. So I think this is what happened. But this book, infinitely better than the movie. I haven't read this in a really long time because it was in middle school, but wow, this book made me feel so much. And I think because it was just in such a bizarre situation, like him being stuck on a boat with a tiger, it was just so introspective at the same time as like being adventurous and really witty with the writing. And there was always just this pure connection that I had to this book just because it's from our main character is from India, and I just love main characters or just books that are set up in countries that I like have ancestry from, just because I feel a deeper connection. And I loved the way that Pondicherry was described in this book and how his being from Pondicherry really shaped his thinking and his life. Going into high school, I think this is such a basic pick. I know everybody loves this book, but it is so special to me. It is so dear to me. Mostly because I was just one of those people always who, no matter if I was even reading anything, I would just feel the need to go to Barnes & Noble and like go and browse. And one day I just like, I saw this book and I was like, ooh, cool cover. And I saw the back. To realize one's destiny is a person's only obligation. And I was like, he kind of ate with that one. And so I picked it up, I read it, but I love this book so much. And it is so well loved for a reason. It's all about like a person's path in life, all about a person's like destiny. And there were so many little symbolisms in this book that just really propelled me to think differently about life, because I think I picked this up when I was just feeling lost. I didn't know what I wanted to do in the future, especially because it was in high school. High school is a really turbulent time, and I didn't really have a career pathway set up for me. I didn't know how my future was going to look. And this kind of pushed me to think, whatever happens to me, whatever is meant for me will come to me. It was just such a calming mindset to have at that time in my life. And I even moved on to like recommend this to people in my life that I feel didn't get to fulfill all their dreams because of certain circumstances. And I really hope that they ended up reading it and felt some sort of push to believe that their life is still available for them to live. All right, next is A New Earth by Eckhart Tolle. So this is also kind of about like life's purpose, but Eckhart Tolle does it in a way that emphasizes mindfulness and consciousness in everything that you do, and how to live your life more fully and more consciously. My sister actually recommended me The Power of Now first, and then I went to reading this one, and this one resonated with me a lot more because I feel like in The Power of Now, all of what he says is very relevant and very like, it's still very awakening, but it's just like, you just need to focus on the now, you just need to focus on the now. But A New Earth, I think, goes more into depth about how you can apply that thinking into your own life and how you can move through life in a more conscious and awakened way in everything that you do, whether it's work, school, or just like your hobbies. And in this book he talks about like the emotional body, how our connection to our egos really controls us and our thinking a lot of the time and how we can try to move past that. The next one is Slaughterhouse-Five by Kurt Vonnegut. This one, I've always heard about it like everywhere because it's a classic, you know, Kurt Vonnegut, Slaughterhouse-Five. But I think this was the book, the first classic to really... Oh, I have another one. Okay. So I brought this one out too because it kind of applies to the same same topic that I'm about to talk about. These two are the classics that really showed me why some classics are considered classics. These two are so good. These are probably my favorite classics ever. And I read both of these in high school. I had to read Picture Dorian Gray for an English class that I took. And I just read Slaughterhouse-Five for fun. But both of these, I think, really defined my taste in classics. I had always read classics because I would always have to read them for English class, or I would just read them for fun just because people would recommend them to me. But none of them stuck out as much as these. And I think it's just the way that they were written, especially the authors. I think the author's style and writing is such a big thing for me, and I love Kurt Vonnegut's writing. Like, it's so... I've read like maybe 3 or 4 of his books now. This one's my favorite, so it goes. But I don't even know what to tell you about these. You just have to read them. You know those people who are always like, I'm not even gonna give you a review, just read them, they're classics for a reason. That's me right now with these two. And I think those two also really renewed my interest in classics, because I think I was just so bored of the classics they were giving us in school. I didn't like To Kill a Mockingbird. I didn't really like Canterbury Tales, but those two, they ate. These 7 books all come from within the past 2 years, because I had just renewed my love for reading again like midway through college. Freshman year was rough, sophomore year was rough, and then my junior year of college, my last year, I was only in college for 3 years. I graduated early, but that was when I really started renewing my love for reading again. These books, I've just been really picky with the way that I've been choosing the books that I read, because I know that not everything is for me. I'm coming to the realization that I don't have to read something just because everybody's recommending it if I'm not really even interested in it. And that has led me to being able to finally learn how to DNF books, because I used to never be able to. I would just force myself through it even if I hated it, and it's just a waste of time. I realize it's just a waste of time. So I've kind of refined my picking and choosing of books. I've been reading so much lately, and they're all books that I absolutely adore. But these are the 7 that really stuck out to me the most. First off, let's start out with the fantasy. I read both of these last year. Lo and behold, Babel. This book, I know everybody talks about it. I know everybody loves it. I know everybody raves about it. But it is with good reason. R.F. Kuang, genius. Genius writing, beautiful story, amazing themes. It is so well written, and just the way that she writes, you can tell that this woman is a genius, educated, amazing, wonderful. The prose in this, shucks, because I can't even like, all I'm gonna, you know those videos on Instagram where they're like no word reviews? I'm just gonna react. Yes, you can. This is, a lot of people talk shit about this book because it was like ununderstandable, but I think that's the point. It's, you can tell that I really like this book. It was so surreal, it was so random, it was so all over the place, and I think that's a theme that I'm finding that I really like in books. I like chaos. I love chaos, and I love books that will make me sit there and be like, what the fuck is going on right now? And this was exactly that. I loved this, and I think the reason that I like this book so much and I chose to put it on this list is because it made me rethink how I perceive the fantasy genre. I had only previously seen this type of chaos and surrealism within like Murakami's books or in lit fic, I never realized how well it could be shown in a fantasy book. Wonderful. Moving from fantasy into sci-fi, I didn't even realize how big this series was until the movie came out. I can't even lie. And I watched the movie and I was like, okay, this is a really cool concept, but the movie just didn't do the world building in this justice. And I have the series down here. I have 2 copies. Well, first of all, I read this is the one that I read, and I have all my little bookmarks in it, but I bought this because I couldn't help myself. Look at the cover, first of all. This is the deluxe version. Inside, and then the dust inside the dust cover. Look at the inside of the dust cover. Yeah, I saw this at Barnes & Noble and I was like, who's gonna stop me? Like, I'm not gonna stop me. Oh, the best part. Fear is the mind killer. How cool is that? I chose to put Dune on here because it was my first, I think, actual sci-fi book that I read, and I loved it. Like, this was my first experience with real sci-fi and real world building, and it was such a good experience because if you've read Dune, you know it's not like, it's unorthodox. Why does this happen in every video I try to record? I say a word and I don't know if it's a real word or not. Uno momento. Unorthodoxically. It is not, it is written unorthodoxically, and I just love the way that everything was set up. I love the way that the plot progressed, that you get to see all these characters and all their different points of views in different parts of the Imperium. I haven't gotten through the entire series yet, but I've gotten up to book 4, and I know my cousin actually told me that it gets a little weird after the 3rd book, but I'm okay with that. I love weird, so it's fine. Next, another sci-fi book, A Psalm for the Wild Built. I think this has taken the spot for my favorite book ever. I still haven't read the 2nd book, which is A Prayer to the Crown Shy, but I feel like this is such a good book on its own. Let me just read you a quote from here so you can get an idea for how the book is. I didn't choose impermanence, Moscap said. The originals did, but I did not. I had to learn my circumstances just as you did. Then how, Dex said, how does the idea of maybe being meaningless sit well with you? Moscap considered. Because I know that no matter what, I'm wonderful, it said. There was nothing arrogant about the statement, nothing flippant or brash. It was merely an acknowledgement, a simple truth shared. For context, Moscap is a robot that the monk finds in the middle of a forest because robots decided to cut off all contact with human beings and retreat into the wild. Just the whole world in this is wonderful. The way that everything is set up is wonderful. It makes such a good setup for how the message is to be portrayed to the reader. Next is The Body Keeps a Score by Bessel van der Kolk. And I know this book has a few complaints about its being recommended all over media, which I wholeheartedly agree with. I don't think that this is a book that should be recommended as like self-help or for like healing yourself. It is written very clinically, and I think this is written just for people who do want to learn about how trauma affects the body and the brain and you as a person. But I don't think this is for people who are trying to heal off of it. He's very straightforward with his cases, and I feel like because of that it can be triggering to quite a few people. But most of the time when I'm reading nonfiction, I go into it with a mindset that I'm here to learn, I'm here to intake this information and take it and apply it to people, to me, to myself, and to help others. But it does definitely help if you are in a space to read it. I actually read this when I was on a trip with my parents, and throughout the whole thing I was realizing so much. Like my relationship with my parents hasn't always been the best, and on that trip when I was reading this book, I was just noticing all these little things that I do whenever I get a cue from my parents. And it's just very interesting to see to take this information and to apply it to yourself when you're actually in a situation that you've had previous trauma in before. Very interesting to reflect back on, and I remember journaling so much on that trip because I was like, oh my god, I am damaged. Anyways.
Ciao. Anyway, so
next one is The Will to Change by Bell Hooks. I think that this is such an essential read for feminists. When I was in high school, it was always that sense of performative activism thing that would always be like, fuck men, because I was all over Twitter and social media and always trying to like fit in with whatever people were saying. I'll fully admit that. I would always go along with like the fuck men train. This book really gives you perspective on how society and the idea of masculinity and how the patriarchy has shaped all of these views that we have on men. A lot of the time they're not even conscious of how they're being affected by this patriarchal system. It really did change the way that I look at the men in my life and how they carry themselves and how men in general carry themselves a lot of the time. It brings forth a lot of compassion within me that I previously wasn't there before. I would also like to bring up Kitchen by Banana Yoshimoto. I just read this about a month ago and I adore Banana Yoshimoto's writing. I already adored Japanese literature just because of how quaint it is and how you can feel so much emotion just through these small moments in people's lives. It's just always so intimate and personal, and I feel like Banana Yoshimoto's writing does that so well. I had been meaning to read her for a long time. This book has been sitting on my shelf for like 2 years now. And lastly, I'm going to talk about a manga that I absolutely adore. This is so good. I love Takehiko Inoue's illustrations. I love the way that he portrayed his characters. I love the way that he portrayed Musashi, and it was just so raw and beautiful, and it was such a good exploration of the human soul and how infinite we are. I'm thinking of one specific panel. I actually have a tattoo. Yeah, it is this panel. I'll put it right here, and it says, do you see how infinite you are? I remember reading that and I was like, I'm infinite. We're all infinite. This definitive edition just came out like in January and I immediately bought it. But look at these illustrations. I love this thing. Look at that! Random page. Look how beautiful this is. So Musashi is also a very popular novel in Japan, and it tells the story about Miyamoto Musashi by Eiji Yoshikawa. And this one actually just came out recently too, because it has Takehiko Inoue's illustration on it on the front cover, and I immediately had to buy this too. I haven't read this one yet, but I plan to now that I have this. I have it displayed with my Vagabond shelf, but Vagabond is about Miyamoto Musashi as well, but it's illustrated in such a beautiful way, and it really just focuses on his humanity, on him as a person, on his journey to strength. It was so good. I love this one. I love this manga. Anyways, I think that's about it. Hopefully y'all enjoyed this video and got some sort of idea of what you might want to read next. Yeah, stay curious, stay mindful, stay open, and until next time.